Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are unpacking the absolutely fascinating research behind why some people cry easily, and we're pulling back the curtain on how human beings are actually wired. Get ready, because we're going to fundamentally change the way you think about emotional expression.
So let's just dive right in and confront a massive cultural assumption that honestly, most of us have just accepted as fact. Think about it. We live in a society that constantly celebrates keeping it together, right? You're told to control your emotions, stay composed, and whatever you do, never let them see you sweat or cry. We've been taught for years that crying easily is a fundamental weakness. But as you'll see, modern psychology disagrees completely.
Section 1. The Stigma of Tears.
Think back to that universal conditioning of childhood. Whether you had a scraped knee or you simply felt something deeply and just didn't know how to hold it in, you were probably met with some harsh words. Toughen up. Stop crying. It was a loud, clear message to shut it down. We are taught super early on that visible emotions and tears are liabilities, things to be embarrassed about. And because of that, kids who felt things intensely have spent their entire lives being labeled as too much or too sensitive.
Section 2. The highly sensitive brain. Now, psychology totally rejects this idea of crying as some sort of character flaw. Instead, they've given us a documented, measurable trait. Psychologist Dr. Elaine Aron coined the term highly sensitive person, or HSP for short. It describes folks whose nervous systems pick up emotional frequencies that the rest of us simply miss. They don't cry easily because they're fragile. No, they cry easily because their brains are genuinely wired to process the world at a much, much deeper level. And hey, this isn't just some tiny, rare anomaly. Look at this breakdown. This deep processing applies to a massive 15 to 20% of the human population. To put that into perspective, that is nearly 1 in 5 people walking around whose brains operate on a fundamentally different emotional frequency. It's huge.
The crucial difference here is the contrast. For the average brain, a touching commercial or a sad song definitely registers, right? But the emotional signal rises, gets processed, and then fades relatively quickly without overwhelming them. But for the highly sensitive brain, that exact same signal hits completely differently. It hits harder, it lasts way longer, and it absolutely demands to be processed completely.
And the wild part is, we can actually see this happening in real time. Neuroimaging shows that highly sensitive individuals have stronger activation in brain regions linked to awareness and empathy, specifically the insula and the mirror neuron system. So these tears, they aren't a performance, they're not manipulation, their brains are actively responding to emotional subtext, involuntarily reading a slight shift in a room's energy or a forced smile exactly the same way you and I read words on a page. When they cry, they're responding to something very real that most people haven't even noticed yet.
Section 3. The Weight of Empathy.
This brings us to an intense biological reality known as empathic resonance. In highly empathic individuals, this mirroring runs incredibly deep. When they see a stranger suffer, or a friend trying to hold it together, they don't just feel bad for them metaphorically. They actually feel it physically. It's literally a tightness in the chest or a lump in the throat. Their eyes fill with tears before they've even made a conscious decision to feel anything at all. This constant mirroring perfectly explains why highly empathic people feel so incredibly exhausted after social events. While you or I might find a big party super energizing, highly sensitive people are constantly tuning into every single undercurrent of emotion in that room. They are actively absorbing pieces of everyone else's pain. So in those moments, their tears aren't a sign of weakness or self-pity. They're a direct response to someone else's reality. It proves they were paying attention at a level most people never even reach. Section 4. Why the feelings linger. Now, it really comes down to this reflex called emotional rumination. Most people feel something, process it, and move forward within a few hours, or maybe a day. But for people who cry easily, their minds haven't fully let it go. They'll go home, replay a conversation, or even revisit a moment from years ago and feel the exact original emotion wash over them all over again. And let's be clear, this isn't them making a choice to be dramatic. It's practically an involuntary reflex of their nervous system.
It really all boils down to this. They don't necessarily feel more emotions, they feel emotions for longer. That lingering signal demands deep, deep integration. They are doing something much more demanding than just coping. They're essentially making meaning out of pain, which, by the way, is exactly why history's most profound artists, writers, and thinkers were deeply sensitive people. They saw further into the human experience than most of us ever cared to look.
Section 5. The Biology of Release.
You know, for a long time, science used to write crying off as just a purely social signal, but recent discoveries have shown a massive biological difference. Just notice how the basic lubricating tears your eyes constantly produce to stay healthy are completely different from emotional tears. Emotional tears are actually chemically distinct, and they are specifically triggered by deep feelings and stress. And here is where it gets absolutely fascinating. We now have definitive proof that crying is literally a physiological detox. Look at the chemical components of emotional tears. They carry elevated levels of stress hormones, actively expelling things like cortisol out of your system. Crying literally purges the biochemical residue of emotional stress from your body. So when people say they feel a sense of pressure lifted after a really good cry, that is not a coincidence. That's the nervous system completing a cycle it desperately needed to finish.
This builds perfectly into the metaphor of a pressure cooker. Because sensitive systems accumulate emotional load so much faster, the release valve just gets triggered more often. Crying isn't breaking down, it is the nervous system actively regulating and maintaining itself. Just like a pressure cooker, having a properly functioning release valve is vastly safer than being sealed tightly shut.
Section 6. Sensitivity is your strength.
Far from being fragile, these individuals hold a remarkably rare form of emotional courage. Just look at the advantages of emotional depth here. People who cry easily are often the absolute best at human relationships. They offer genuine, incredibly present listening skills because they actually hear what isn't being said out loud. They possess remarkably high levels of emotional self-awareness. And honestly, most beautifully, they maintain an unguarded, real connection to life. They haven't armored over. They remain connected to the full beauty and the grief of the human experience without numbing out.
So I want to leave you with this final thought to sit with today. What if feeling deeply isn't the opposite of strength, but actually the ultimate proof of it? Perhaps the strongest person in the room isn't the one who never flinches, or the one who's mastered the performance of being completely unmoved. Perhaps the strongest person is the one who still allows themselves to feel, the one who hasn't traded their sensitivity just for social approval. Keep that in mind the next time you see someone cry, and remember the profound strength operating right beneath the surface.